Okay, I had a few people ask about the fish tank here, so I figured I'd shoot a quick video and show the tank as it currently is, and also describe how I set it up. Kind of a do-it-yourself kind of guy, so tried to do as much as I could to save some cash, because as anybody knows that has a fish tank, this hobby can get quite expensive. So I've got a 90-gallon tank and currently have 3 clownfish, 1 sailfin tang, 2 blue-green chromis, a bicolor angel, and there's also a green brittle starfish hiding in there somewhere. Show you guys the filter setup that I have. Basically what I did is converted an old hang-on filter into an overflow box. I simply took a few pieces of cut glass and epoxied them together for the overflow box itself inside the tank. Then I have 2 hoses that I'm using for a siphon to take the water from the inside of the tank down into the overflow box. I'll go ahead and take the cover off here. Take a look down inside. It's pretty simple. Down here in the lower corner is where the pump for the original filter was, the siphon pump. I removed that, which created a hole, and what I simply did is took some 1-inch PVC and glued it to the bottom of that hole and made that my overflow line. Going to the back of the tank here, you can see the 1-inch piece of PVC coming down, and that piece of 1-inch PVC is then plumbed in over into my sump down below. Now I have another 10-gallon tank that is simply filled with RO water, which, as many of you may know, RO is just simply reverse osmosis, which I have a filter set up to create my own instead of purchasing it from a local fish store. Simply have a return pump that is inside this tank that is hooked up to an automatic top-off system that will pump water over into the return pump area when it's needed. Move over now into the sump, or the filter tank. Now this is the area of the tank where the water that is being siphoned out of the tank from the overflow box down that piece of white PVC into this area. In this area you can see that I have my heater, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but behind these bubbles, there's a little guy right here, and he is actually a turbo snail, and I keep him down in this area just to keep it clean so I don't have to. It does a lot of my work for me. The bubbles is actually an overflow for any water that does not trickle down my algae scrubber. I decided to go with an algae scrubber rather than a protein skimmer, basically because of the cost effectiveness, and also because I heard they work better, even though that may be different than some common belief, but it works pretty well for my system. Now the algae scrubber itself, as you can see, I have 2 lights, one pointed at each side of the algae scrubber. Move over to the side here, you can see the screen itself. It may be kind of hard to see, but basically I have water trickling down a piece of plastic mesh that I have roughed up so the algae sticks to it, and then that algae grows, and that's actually the biological filter. And as you can see, I have a piece of wood that is hanging from each side to protect the top area of the plastic from the light, so that way algae does not grow up inside the slot that I have cut inside of this 1-inch piece of PVC piping. And then on the ends, I have simply put some small pieces of plexiglass to prevent any water from trickling down outside of the tank and getting everything all wet. Now moving over to the center area of the sump, I have 3 pieces of plate glass. The 2 outside pieces go all the way to the bottom of the sump. The center piece is approximately 1 inch to 1.5 inches off of the bottom. The water moves over the first piece of glass, down under the second piece, and then up over the third. This is actually my bubble trap, which prevents micro bubbles from forming inside the main display tank, which keeps the water nice and clear. I'll move over a little bit more. What I created is what's called a fuge, or a refugium. Now inside this area, basically I have a very deep sand bed of some live sand, and I also had a few smaller pieces of live rock that I really couldn't fit inside the display tank, so I decided to put them in here for a little bit more of a natural filtration in this area as well. I do not currently have any macro algae in here. My levels seem to be stable enough, so I may add that later on if necessary. Now if I slide over to the return pump area, I'll show you the simple automatic top-off system. As you can see, there are 2 white floats inside the square gray housing, and the water level, when it goes too low on the left side and that float falls down, it actually kicks on the return pump in the overflow, or I should say the top-off tank that I showed you earlier with the pump in it, and that pump will simply pump a little bit of water and bring that float up and then shut it off. The second float on the right is simply a backup just in case the float on the left sticks. It will only go up to the height of the second float, and when the second float floats up, it will shut off that pump and prevent it from accidentally overflowing my sump. Now down in here is my return pump area. It's kind of dark, hard to see. I have a thermometer in this area to keep track of the water temperature of the water that I'm pumping back into my main display tank. I'll cruise around the side here, might give you a little bit better view. As you can see, I actually have 2 pumps in here. The pump on the right is my return pump, which is pumping the water back up into the main display tank. And then the pump on the left is actually pumping water into a UV sterilizer. And then the return line on the UV sterilizer is simply returning that water right back into this area. Now, the best setup would be to have that UV sterilizer built into the return line to ensure that all water that goes back into the main display goes through the UV sterilizer. However, the size of the return pump that I had, I wanted to make sure I got the most bang for my buck, so to say, and I didn't want to push it through the UV sterilizer and reduce my amount of flow. So as of now, I have it set up in this nature. I'll show the UV sterilizer that I have, just simply hanging on the back. That's a large, long black cylinder that you can see there, and that is simply there to try to kill any parasites that may be living in the water system. So then I have a return line from this pump down on the right, going up into this piece of PVC. I have a ball check valve where I can adjust the amount of flow. As it turns out, I actually have mine wide open, So I'm not restricting that pump whatsoever. The water comes up, this piece of PVC, up over the top, and back into the main display. Now I have 3 circulation pumps in my tank. I have one here, which is, I believe, pushing about 600 gallons per hour. I have another small one here, which I believe is only pushing somewhere around 120, and then another identical one over here in the corner. Just trying to get as much flow as I can. As you can see, the top of the water is moving around pretty good, trying to circulate the best I can, trying to keep oxygen in the water. I have 2 sets of lights on the top of the tank. Each are running 2 T5 high output bulbs, 1 actinic and 1 daylight in each. Then also, try to show you the best I can here, underneath you can see the red wire. You can see a small LED strip. I have an identical one on the other side. What I wanted was a nighttime effect. So I actually ended up going up to my local automotive supply store, which is significantly cheaper, and just simply got some blue LEDs for cars, and they're all sealed, designed to go on the bottom of a car, so it'll help prevent any corrosion or any electrocution issues, just in case some water happens to splash up. And that's it. I give you guys a quick tour here, and that's my setup as of now. If I make any major changes, I'll keep you up to date.